In the Field updates on Market Journal are supported by the Nebraska Corn Board. But first, let's check in on harvest progress now with this In the Field update. Earlier this week, we had the chance to catch up with Jerry Stahr, who is harvesting corn just north of York, Nebraska. Good, Jerry, we appreciate the time today. Remind me a little about your operation, how you guys have corn and soybeans, as well as who's helping you farm.
Yes, that's basically that's what we're down to anymore, is just a corn and soybean rotation. Got rid of the cattle about 15 years ago when my last kid graduated from school and my labor force disappeared.
I like how that works, how you time that out, Jerry. Remind me where you're at, again, near York, Nebraska, your irrigation versus dry land situation.
Basically, we're probably 85 to 90% irrigated, and the rest is dry land.
Okay. If we go back to the springtime, had a chance to head out to your operation. Some of our viewers might remember that. And you told me that planting conditions, as we visited there in April, it was powder dry. You were hoping, though, that the old phrase, plant in the dust, bins will bust, would come true for you. Just walk me through the growing season in terms of moisture, how things fared.
Well, to get that bins will bust thing, you have to have some moisture. And I think at last count, we've only had about 13 inches for the year here, between 13 and 14 inches. Normally we're 24 to 27. So the bins are busting pretty good under irrigation, but outside of that, not so good. Now there are areas around us. My sister lives in Albee and they've had great rains up there, so I think their bins will bust. So, you know, it's an old wives' tale, and obviously they aren't totally accurate with those.
Well, bring me up to speed where you sit right now, harvest progress-wise, Jerry.
100% done with beans, and 95%, 96% done with corn. We have 50 acres left here, and we have to finish that up. Well, hopefully we'll finish it up in the next couple days, but it's slow going because a lot of it is down.
Okay, I'll come back and ask you about that down corn here coming up in a second. But looking back on your soybeans this year, of course, under the pivot, that sure helps yields. But overall, how would you describe the soybean yields this year compared to where you typically sit?
For me, they were a total disappointment. For what we did, the problem is we had all that heat late. And they matured, but they matured so fast. They had as much water as you could give them, but they just came along too fast.
Now back on the corn front, you mentioned down corn. When did that happen, Jerry, and how bad of a situation is it for you?
Oh my gracious, you're asking hard questions. I can't hardly remember how to tie my shoes each morning. I'm guessing it was just about a week and a half ago that we had a front come through, and we had high winds. We got some moisture with it. I know 60 or 70 hundredths of moisture, but the winds were the problem. And it's just like any kind of wind situation. There's places where it's good, sometimes it's bad. And the area that this field in had more wind and it had bigger problem.
So how are you adjusting to trying to pick up the corn that is down? Any special things you can do, or just take things slow through the fields, Jerry?
Well, basically we have rented a head that has spirals on the outside edge. We've taken some of the, well, I call them mud flaps. They're actually ear savers on there, and some other pieces off of it to get things to slide a little better. So right now we are, my son's struggling, let's put it that way.
Well, going back again, when you and I had the chance to catch up as you were planting in April, you shared with me that they were doing some experimenting, planting dwarf corn. I suppose those are the acres you wish that you would have had left. They might have held up a little bit better when it comes to wind, but how did that dwarf corn do this year?
Well, that's another issue. We also had hail here this year, and that was one of the fields that got hailed out. So there was no comparison on the dwarf corn. It was an exciting idea, but so far it hasn't happened. So we'll try it again next year. That's what farming's all about. You always look to the next year.
And you're an optimist, which I always appreciate, Jerry, that about you, no doubt about that. I guess as you look back in the last growing season, I'll wrap it up with this. How are you going to remember 2023?
In hindsight, hopefully. Behind me is better, trust me. So I've got some friends that retired in the last couple of years, and I'm saying, you know, they know how to do it. They retired at exactly the right time, so I'm not that bright.
Well, Jerry, we appreciate you making time for us to swing by. You just got a few acres of corn left, and certainly want to wish you and your son a safe rest of the harvest season. Appreciate the time, Jerry.